5-Minute Habits for Healthy Living. This week's habit is meditate. Hello, this is Dr. Brian Morris, and welcome to 5-Minute Habits for Healthy Living, where you will learn the tools to practice a healthy lifestyle 5 minutes at a time. Life has become very complicated with a seemingly endless amount of health information at our fingertips. How do you know what to believe and what not to believe? In these podcast episodes, I will sort through the maze of medical information and distill it into easy-to-digest, time-tested, evidence-based practical strategies for optimal health. I've been practicing internal medicine for 20 years. I went to medical school at Johns Hopkins, I trained at Yale, and I previously held a teaching position at Harvard Medical School. I currently practice medicine and hold a teaching appointment at UCLA Medical School here in Los Angeles, where I teach these tools and these strategies to medical students, house staff, doctors, and of course, to my patients. Before we get to this week's habit, I'd like to remind you that the information contained in this podcast and at 5minutemd.com is intended solely for educational purposes and should not be used to diagnose, treat, or prevent any health condition or illness. This information may not apply to a specific health situation and is not a substitute for medical care by a qualified, licensed, board-certified healthcare professional. Please consult with your healthcare provider before implementing any of the ideas in this podcast or making any changes in your healthcare regimen. This week's habit is meditate. If I told you that a recent study showed that performing an activity every day would reduce your risk of dying by 48%, would you give it a try? Well, that's what we will be discussing today, something that appears to be so simple and yet so important to our health. In a previous habit, we discussed the importance of activity. Well, in this episode, we'll be discussing the importance of moving less. Yes, less. Our bodies are peculiar things that we need to both move more and move less. For most people, getting an average of 10,000 steps per day is a reasonable goal that keeps our bodies and our minds in shape. However, we also need short periods of time every day for our minds and our bodies to take a short vacation, time to recharge. This is the core of meditation, which also goes by other names such as stress reduction, relaxation, or mindfulness. There's many different names that are attached to this concept. I recently started to think about this more, and believe it or not, the thing that got me thinking about this was my smartphone. Every night I attach my trusted smartphone to the charge cable so that when I wake up in the morning, the battery is fresh and ready to go. Well, one day recently I fell asleep and I forgot to charge my smartphone. When I woke up in the morning, I found, of course, that my battery was dead. And I realized that this was actually a fairly good analogy for life. We need to use our mind and our body throughout the day. However, if we don't recharge at the end of the day, eventually we wake up in the morning with a dead battery. We usually experience this as a lack of energy or lack of motivation. So what is this recharging, and how does it relate to our lives? One of the best ways to recharge ourselves is meditation. It's a short period of time each day when we turn off our thinking, active mind. What do you do during these sessions? Well, it turns out that it's difficult to simply not think and turn off our brains. So the best way to recharge our internal batteries is to actually find something to focus on during these meditation sessions. It can be our breath. It can be our hand. It could be a mantra, such as a word or a phrase that we focus on. It can be many different things. Dr. Herbert Benson of Harvard Medical School did some very interesting studies in the past where he showed that the most effective focus tool for our minds during meditation is to find a word or a phrase that means something to you. It has to have some emotional resonance for you for it to be most impactful. It can be the name of someone special to you. It can be a religious passage. It can be a line from a book that you really loved. It can be any other word or phrase that brings positive thoughts and feelings to you. Dr. Benson found that people get the best results by focusing on this word or phrase that's personal to them, and that focusing on a generic word such as just peace or love doesn't work quite as well. Once you've picked that word or phrase that is most meaningful to you, the next step is to find a quiet place to sit down where you'll be free of distractions and noise. Usually that means sitting in a chair in a quiet room, either with your eyes open or your eyes closed, and repeating this focus word or phrase either out loud or to yourself for a given period of time. For most people, this goes okay and it works for about 15 or 20 or 30 seconds. But then for most of us, thoughts from our lives will probably start to intrude into our mind stream at that point. You'll start thinking, why am I doing this? You'll start thinking about a project going on at work or at home. You'll start thinking about a sporting event, or you'll start thinking about a movie that you want to see or a book you want to read. The issue is that after a short period of time, other thoughts will start entering into your mind, and it becomes difficult to stay with your focus word or phrase. When this happens, what you should do is let those outside thoughts go passively. Don't get upset with yourself. Just let those thoughts go and return gently to your focus word or phrase. Just be gentle with yourself and come back to your word or phrase. It's sort of like driving a car. That's a good analogy for this. As you're driving down the road or the highway, you will notice that your car will start to shift over to the right or to the left. And what we do, sort of unconsciously on some level, is we gently will turn the steering wheel back, either counterclockwise or clockwise, to bring the car back into alignment, going straight down the road. Likewise, your goal here is to keep your mind set on your focus word or phrase, and that when other thoughts try to enter into your mind stream, you let those thoughts go and you gently turn your internal steering wheel back to your focus word or phrase. You passively let those outside thoughts go and come back to where your focus should be during this session. This is a process of training our minds to concentrate on a focus word or phrase and not to think. It sounds counterintuitive to the way that we normally live our lives when we're trying to think as much as we possibly can. Here, we're actually turning our brains off and thinking less. It does sound somewhat simple, but it's actually quite challenging. It's actually very difficult to turn off our minds in our society where tablets and smartphones and computers and everything is so readily available to us and so stimulating to our brains. We've been trained to think with great precision and speed. Few of us have been taught to think less, to turn off our minds, and to train our brains to focus. I look at this process as an actual vacation for the mind. It's a mental holiday, a time to rejuvenate our mind and also our body. Some call this meditation, some call this mindfulness, some call this relaxation. Whatever you call this, it is a rewarding process that makes every other minute of the day that much more rewarding. How long should you do this? If this is new to you, try for just a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes a day. Once you become facile at this, try to increase the length of your sessions till you get to about 10 minutes twice a day. How valuable is this? Recently, a study was published in the journal Circulation, which is one of the most highly respected academic journals in the United States. In this study, patients were randomized to either meditation every day or to take a health education course. The researchers found that after 5 years, the patients who were in the meditation group had a 48% lower risk of death, heart attack, and stroke than the group that took the health education course. That is a staggering number. If a medication could give people that much benefit, it would likely become the biggest selling pharmaceutical product of all time. Instead, this is a basic habit that can be practiced every day and can be incredibly beneficial to our health. What about other relaxation techniques such as yoga, Pilates, biofeedback, etc.? Each of these can be helpful to certain people. The key is to find a relaxation technique where you practice focusing your attention on a word, a phrase, a movement for a period of time, and where you turn off your active thinking mind for a short period of time. Many people are amazed by how much better they feel when they start meditating. So here's your homework for this week. For 5 minutes a day, try a relaxation technique such as the one I mentioned, or another form of meditation or mindfulness. For most, the best way to start this is to pick a word or a phrase that you are connected to on an emotional level. Try to spend some time finding a word or phrase that really makes you feel good. And then for 5 minutes a day, sit in a comfortable chair and repeat that word or phrase to yourself for 5 minutes. And when other thoughts try to intrude on your practice, let those thoughts go and return to your focused word or phrase. This simple technique can be incredibly rejuvenating if you stick with it and practice it on a daily basis. Let's keep the dialogue going. Let me know what you think of this week's habit for healthy living. Post your comments and your experiences on the 5-Minute MD Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter at Brian Morris MD and visit us anytime at 5minutemd.com. Let your friends know about the podcast and make sure that you are subscribed on iTunes. When you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, you will receive new podcast episodes as soon as they are posted. Also, we will be posting bonus podcast episodes at 5minutemd.com, including special podcast episodes not available on iTunes or YouTube. If you're finding the information on this podcast helpful, you may want to check out these episodes as well. And lastly, if you have a few minutes, stop on by iTunes and leave our podcast a review. Thank you so much for listening, and remember to make today count. I will see you at the next 5.